Welcome to the Lasting Love Connection podcast. On today's show, I've brought on Dr. Daniel Siegel. He's one of the leading researchers on neurobiology and the teen brain. It's such an important subject for today's parents. How does the teen brain function, and how can we utilize that information to become better parents, mentors, or coaches for the teens in our lives? And how can we use the knowledge and wisdom that teens have to impact us to make us better people as well? Because teenagers have so much to teach. Kamala and I used to argue about the same issues over and over and then over again without finding a solution.
And then we decided to start applying the tools that we had as coaches into our own relationship. Hey, who would have thought?
We created a free video training series to help couples just like ourselves. And if you're one of those couples, head on over to lastingloveconnection.com, get the free video training series, and it's completely private, so you won't have to tell anybody that you're having some issues that you can't resolve.
Sign up at lastingloveconnection.com, and we really look forward to seeing you there.
So your book Brainstorm is written for parents and teens to read together. That's something new. How did you come up with that idea, and did you feel like it was successful?
Well, I have two adolescents in my family, and I noticed there was nothing they could read themselves that was of any depth or scientific background about what's going on in their lives, whether you think of the mind or relationships or the brain or their bodies. So that concerned me. And then I noticed that when I went to the bookstore and looked online at what was available, there was nothing not only for adolescents to read, but for adolescents and adults to read together, to share in an understanding. And then the third thing was, this new revolution in understanding the adolescent brain has completely transformed how we think about adolescence. So no one had that accessible to them. So I wanted to combine all those things, something for adolescents to read, something for adolescents and adults to find a common ground, and something that translated the science of adolescent changes, including the brain, for the public. So that's what I did. And, I sent it out to adolescents to read and adults to read, got their feedback, changed it, got more feedback, changed it. So the final product is a collaborative effort across many adolescents who gave me their input. So I'm happy with the outcome, and people seem to like it a lot. So I think it's working out well.
One of the things that I got from your book that I found interesting was that you talk about what I really got from it is that you have a lot of respect for teens and what they're going through, and see it as just a really awesome stage of life.
Yeah. That's exactly right, Luis. I hear too often as an adolescent therapist, I'm a psychiatrist who works with children and adolescents and adults, whether I'm working with a couple talking about their adolescent or working with a family with the adolescents in the room, there's a kind of understanding that people have that is filled with misinformation. I guess you could call these myths, that they're misleading beliefs that people hold as truth.
Right.
And, those myths include things like, adolescence as a period of time is just a time of immaturity and they just have to hurry up and grow up, or, the adolescent period has nothing really good about it. You just got to cross your fingers and hope you get through it. And even you can tell in our culture, the word adolescent is sometimes used as an insult.
Mm-hmm.
You say, "Oh, how adolescent of you, Louise," and then it's like, "Wow, that wasn't nice, Dan. Why'd you say that to him?" So, in all these ways, the whole word, concept, and attitude of adolescence by adults is demeaning and insulting. And when you look at the science of adolescence, you realize a couple things. One, people rise to the level of the lowest expectations that you have for them. So if you think, that they're going to be crazy, impulsive, selfish people, they're more likely to be that way. So it's not only wrong, but it's actually sort of priming the pump. You're setting yourself up in a family or as a culture, I think, to really lose track of the fact that, and this is what I believe from the science, this is an unbelievable period of change and opportunity that actually, when you look at the essence of it, it's something not only do we not want to rush through, but we want to nurture it, to savor it, and even, and this will shock many adults, when you look at the essence of adolescence, try to hold on to that in your own adulthood. Because many people have lost that essence that we can talk about in a moment, actually feel like their life vitality has drained out of them.
Yeah, I'm thinking of this movie, Don Juan DeMarco, and there's this scene where the husband is laying in bed with his wife, and they've been married for 30 plus years, and he says, "I want to fall in love, with you again," to his wife, and she's like, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Well, I want that youthfulness that we used to have, when we're in the fire and the throes of love." And she's like, "But that's dangerous, we have safety now, we have comfort." And that's kind of what you're getting at, is that there's something really wonderful about adolescence that as adults maybe we can utilize to reflect on.
Exactly. And I think if we do that, I think actually it's going to reduce a lot of the friction between adolescents and adults, because, this is hard. When I was writing the book, Brainstorm, it was really a tough moment when I realized that there's an essence from the new understanding of the science of the adolescent brain, for example, that when you look at the science of adult brains and what we need as adults to keep our brains growing well, because they grow throughout the lifespan, and keeping vital, and you can do things intentionally to keep your brain vital as an adult. But the way to do that is actually the essence of what adolescent brain changes are all about. So I think if adults can embrace that, it would be great. If they don't embrace it, here's what I was worried about when I was writing the book, that some of the, maybe not all, but some of the tension you see between some adults and their adolescents at home is because the adolescents feel, even if they're not aware of it, they feel kind of jealous of what the adolescent is experiencing, and they, on a deep level, long for it, like an emotional spark in your life, or friends that are really passionately connected to you, or the novelty that adolescents seek, or the creative ways that adolescents think outside the box. Instead, we get kind of this dullness of our emotional life. Our passion drains away, so there's no emotional spark. For social engagement, we kind of get isolated as adults instead of having the important relationships that keep us really feeling alive and connected. We don't seek the novelty that adolescents do because we get in this rut and things are the same old, same old. And then for creative exploration, we usually don't challenge our minds and challenge the world. We usually try to just get in our niche and do what we do, and that's kind of life, and gets a dull quality to it. So that essence, which actually spells the word essence, emotional spark, social engagement, novelty, creative exploration, that essence literally is what science tells us is going on, and it's what I would suggest we as adults should try to get back in our life.
How do we do that as adults? I know that, as I've gotten older, when writing, for example, I first started writing when I was in my teens, and I was really compelled to write just because I had this overflow of emotions and this kind of teen angst, right? And this need to express myself. And now as an adult, there's a sort of rigidity that often occurs when I sit down to write, or maybe when I approach people and socialize. There's just more boxes that we create as we get older, it seems.
Yeah, I think those boxes can become like a trap, like you're describing it, Luis, rather than, let those boxes be put on the ground and you step on top of them to look over the walls that are enclosing your life. So we can, I think it's a certain kind of attitude, and I try to describe this in the book for the adult reading the book, that when you do these exercises, I call them Mindsight Exercises, where you kind of develop this particular circuitry in your own brain to drop beneath your patterned ways of thinking. And there's a practice called the Wheel of Awareness practice that can help you do this, and that you learn in the book. This Wheel of Awareness practice drops you beneath patterned ways of thinking and literally opens up this whole new avenue for a sense of clarity, openness, willingness to try on new things, because you're stopping the understandable patterns that have sucked you up into them, this kind of way in which we get used to thinking the same way. So in many ways, this invitation is a way of taking the ordinary and allowing it to be extraordinary, because we do get lost in conditioning. So we'll say, well, I've seen a sunset before. Why do I need to see another sunset? Well, because you're going to be dead one day. So this sunset, you should realize, is super special. This will never happen again. Even if you're going to live another 25, 50, 75 years, this sunset is amazing. And so, this is a way where you kind of wake adults up out of their slumber and say, hey, get back that, energy that you had. Now, it does come along sometimes with angst, that's for sure. And so we don't want to go all the way to saying, okay, have an identity crisis like we do in adolescence and all that stuff. But in a way, you want to have an identity challenge. So you don't take yourself so seriously. You bring more playfulness and humor into your life. There's all sorts of ways of shaking things up for yourself intentionally. And that's a whole different thing than when you do it yourself versus when things are just sort of happening and you feel like you're this passive recipient of all the difficult things in life,
When I was reading your book, I liked how you talked about mindsight and enjoyed utilizing some of the activities. I've been a long-time meditator myself, so for me it was quite similar to meditation. I got curious, how have you done, when you do these activities with teens, how do they receive them? Do they like them? Do they enjoy them?
Yeah, it depends on the setting. I think from my experience, when teens are forced to do something, it feels like it's just being shoved on them.
Right.
But when I've been given the opportunity to teach, let's say in schools, and just say, hey, here's what's going on in your brain. You, the adolescent, are the only one who can really decide how you're going to focus your mind, focus your attention, to shape the way that brain is firing in the present moment. And what we say is that, how things fire and where you put energy, that's how they wire up. That's where they make their structural change. So I say that's up to you. So here's an exercise. If you want to strengthen your brain, you can do it. Otherwise, don't do it. But if you choose to do it, let's do it. So we'll do like the wheel practice. And then they're choosing to do it.
Right.
And, so that's a really important factor, to set the context so it becomes a choice that people are expressing, and that's true of adults too. The second thing about it is, that a reflective practice that trains the mind, which has the formal term meditation, can sometimes be seen as kind of weird or, like way out there or something like that. So I think we have to be careful when we use the word meditation to realize that a lot of people have connotations, that is, reactions, feelings, beliefs, their own personal definition, that may make the word itself make people cringe and not want to do it. So to me, the word meditation is one of those words. There's so many different connotations people have about it that I'd be very careful. So I would use the word reflection, or let's do a reflective exercise, let's do a brain-building exercise. Meditation just means simply training the mind. So if that simple definition is held, then no problem using it. But some people see it as some really strange, religious thing they don't want to get involved in. It may be against their particular religion, or they don't want to be involved in anything that sounds like meditation. So, but if you mean like doing a practice that you strengthen your mind, train your brain, improve your relationships, make your health better, then we know that these reflective practices can do that. And that's how I invite teens to be interested in doing it, and then for them to choose it themselves.
That does sound really great too, because I know that as a teenager, if you approached me and you said we're going to meditate, I would have thought, I don't want to do that hippie stuff,
Yeah, exactly. Hippy dippy. I don't want to be a part of it.
Right.
And that's I think we're at a place now where the science of different forms of meditation has made it really clear. It's a way of focusing attention in a specific way to strengthen certain capacities that rely on certain circuits of the brain. So, your ability, for example, to focus attention, your ability to bring emotional balance into your life, your ability to gain access to memory, your ability to drop beneath judgments and see things with a more open mind and make the ordinary extraordinary, your capacity to become more empathic. These are all skills, and just like you might develop, your ability to dribble a basketball or, swim or ride a bike or ski or, those are skills too. If you want to learn to ride a bike, you don't just get on a mountaintop and ski. There's nothing wrong with skiing, but it's not going to get you trained to ride a bike. So in the same way, we want to know what are the skills we want to nurture in ourselves or others, and then get that kind of skill training going. So that's basically what meditation is.
I would love to ask about how you worked with one of your clients and maybe how Mindsight kind of worked with her, because some of the parents that I work with are working to help their teens develop certain levels of cognition and thought that, make them healthier, active citizens or participants of life. And you had a particular client named Katie who brought alcohol to a school party. And you talked a little bit about how, as parents, we would go to Katie and say, what were you thinking? And
yeah, exactly.
We tend to think that she wasn't thinking. And in your book, you say, well, in your conversation with Katie, she, wanted to bring the alcohol. She thought it would be cool. It'd get her attention. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Katie is a good example of the myths we sometimes have where we think, adolescents are very impulsive, and that's what leads to the known risk of their behavior. So the first thing to say is adolescents do engage in risky behavior that makes them 3 times more likely to have serious injuries or even death, even though their bodies are stronger than in any other time. So it's a truth that adolescence is a risky period, adolescence being 12 to 24 roughly. What is a myth is that it's only impulsivity. So in the early teenage years, yes, you can act without thinking and planning. But in Katie's case, she reveals that she could plan this out for weeks. So it was not an impulsive act. So then you could say, well, what was it then? And 2 things we learned about adolescence in general and Katie in particular is that, there's a change in the reward system that's mediated by a neurotransmitter called dopamine. And the drop in the baseline levels of dopamine and the rise in the release levels mean that there's a big pull towards doing something that's novel and exciting. Now, that pull is massively increased if you think your peers are going to see the outcome of what you do either directly or hear about it later on. The second thing that goes on that pulls Katie in this direction of bringing alcohol to a party, which happened to be at her best friend's house, who happened to be the daughter of the headmaster of the school, which happened to be before school started, so it was a school function, which happened to be you can't have any alcohol. 0 tolerance.
Right. I mean, if I was her dad, I would think, Katie, you really weren't thinking, what is going on? This is just ludicrous.
So she was thinking, but she was engaging what's called hyper-rational thinking. What that means is she rationalized why the upside of this act far outweighed the downside, which she never really even cared about. What's the downside? She's expelled from school. Kids get drunk. They get in their cars. They go out. Someone get hurt. There's a lot of downsides to having kids drinking, not to mention the fact that it's illegal and they can get arrested. So these were all things that she knew about. It's not like adolescents or Katie don't know about. They know about the dangers, the research tells us. They just don't care about them because of hyper-rational thinking, and they're pulled toward the positive also because of this dopamine change. So, what Katie's saying is, this was not an impulsive act. And she learned, as we talked about it, that it was a hyper-rational act, and that her dopamine system made her not only at risk for doing something like that, but it turns out that she had a tendency toward addiction, and dopamine changes during adolescence make it so that adolescents are much more at risk of developing an addiction to alcohol or cigarettes or other substances, than at any other time, because the dopamine system is in such flux at that moment in our lives.
So how do we help Katie change that connection? Because some parents are listening to this and they're thinking, my kid's been engaging in all sorts of activities that aren't healthy, and I want to utilize maybe some of that brain science that you're talking about to help them make healthier decisions.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's important to say that adolescence as a group and adolescence as a period of time is challenging for any parent. So your parents listening to this should take a deep breath and just know this, there's no question about it, is a very challenging time. So to expect that even having knowledge will make things smoother just by itself isn't necessarily going to happen. So you want to combine knowledge with practical application, just like you're saying. So what's the practical application? This basic stance, the basic approach that is, I think, really useful is embedded in a word called presence. You, as a parent, want to stay present in your child's life, your adolescent's life, your older adult child's life. And presence doesn't mean in someone's face, and presence doesn't mean you're always with them. It just means you are present for whatever arises. So let's take Katie's example. Her parents could have massively come down on her. In fact, they did quite a bit. And they would have lost their relationship with their daughter. Instead, with some counseling help, they were able to stay present. Now, what does that mean? That means to explore with Katie what was going on inside of her, to see how she feels about the consequences that are happening, that is, she was expelled from her school, what it meant to have to write an essay to college saying why you were expelled from the school you were doing well in. So she had to write about her drinking. These were things that instead of her parents just humiliating her and saying she did such a bad thing and what a bad person she is, they stayed present with her. Now, when you do that and you couple that with knowledge, so with some assistance from me, we could talk about, what's going on in the adolescent brain, what is hyper-rational thinking, what does this dopamine change really mean for being driven to try exciting things like that have risk to them, understanding even that the risks that adolescents take also have an upside. I mean, the downside, of course, you can get hurt or get expelled from school. The upside is it's a state of mind that allows you to try out the world instead of being cowering in your familiar family home. You have the courage to go out and explore the world out there. So this drive for novelty that the dopamine change creates and that hyper-rational thinking enables is actually necessary. It's not a sign of pathology usually. It's necessary. And when you get that attitude, parents have a lot of empowerment to stay present. The adolescent feels really heard and understood and respected. And it changes the whole dynamic because then it becomes a more collaborative journey rather than parents going, oh my God, what's this terrible teen going to do? And, when you see families that are in the midst of that kind of struggle, it's painful for everyone. Nobody's benefiting and nobody feels good.
It must have been hard to kind of shift Katie's parents to seeing that perspective of Katie was seeking novelty, she was seeking a new experience, she was trying something new. and must have been a really hard shift for them to get present and say, okay, this is what's going on for her. Let me get curious and talk to her about it.
Yeah, Luis, the way you're describing it is exactly how it was. It was very difficult. And, for me as a therapist and also for me as a dad, this concept of presence is so powerful because with presence, you have the gateway toward connection. And maintaining connections are the essential thing we need to do as a parent. Whatever our kids are going through, mine are in their 20s now, and so I can say, the kinds of communication and connection that I have with these two adolescents are still below 25, it's just beautiful. And it wasn't always this way. In the earlier teen years, it was very challenging. But my wife and I really tried to, create presence, to cultivate connections with them, even when things were confusing to us or were maddening to us, to really understand that and give respect. And I think it's a win-win situation because when you do it like that, you're going to maintain the lines of communication, which is exactly what all the research shows adolescents need to thrive. They need open lines of communication with the adults in their lives. And then it allows you to actually learn from your adolescent about what's going on. So as the story of Katie unfolds and she goes from high school off to college, and in the book Brainstorm, I continue to show what happened in her therapy, she was willing to talk about how this alcohol issue for her over the years was becoming a really serious problem. And, for me to be able to maintain these lines of communication with her made it possible then to talk to her about what it's like to realize you may be an alcoholic and that you actually may need to stop alcohol in your life. Like having an allergy to a strawberry. You just don't eat strawberries, And this is what she learned to be open to, not because I was yelling at her or saying, oh, you immature teen, what's wrong with you? Or no, it's because I tried to stay present with her as her therapist, as I'm trying to counsel her parents to do in that stage of her life. And it's good across the lifespan.
You're talking a lot about presence, and I think it's fantastic because you, in your book Mindsight, you talk about going to get some crepes with your kids and being highly irritated while you're with them, and the challenge of getting present. And in the same book, you talk about mirror neurons, which I just want to read a little quote here because I think it's really significant when we're talking about creating connection, whether it's with our children, our partners, our coworkers. And here's your quote. Since the human brain is composed of, quote, mirror neurons that soak up the feelings of others around us, you naturally sponge up her anxiety and fear. And this is something you said to a client, I think it was. And one of the things that you're getting at is that we have these neurons in our brains that want to mirror the emotions of others.
Yes.
And so when we're upset with our kids or when we're upset with our partner, or spouse, or coworker, how do we get present? What do we need to do in order so that we're not sending off this "I'm mad at you" and then they respond back to us, "I'm mad at you too"?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is exactly the point that, and it's interesting, the Crepes of Wrath story. Listen, there's no such thing as perfect parenting, and the Crepes of Wrath story is basically where I lost it. I didn't stay present, and I became what I called someone going down the low road. I lost my mind, basically, because of some little chess game my kids were playing with each other over who gets whose crepe and this kind of thing. But in the sad moment when you lose it as a parent and you're not present, you're just reactive instead of receptive, those are moments of really significant rupture. And in the story in the Mindsight book, Crepes of Wrath, I talk about what happens in my brain when I'm flipping my lid, flying off the handle, what happened in the relationship with my kids, and then, ways I try to repair that rupture. When I showed my son, when I was about to publish that book, the chapter, and I said, please read this, make sure it's accurate. So he read it. He said, yes, it's accurate. I said, okay, is it okay if I put it in? He goes, it's okay with me. He goes, but I don't understand what's wrong with you. He goes, why would you put that in your book? Because you look like a jerk. And it's true. I mean, I acted like a jerk. And I said to him, I want every reader to know that this is just what it means to be human. You can flip your lid, do things you don't want to do that are not ideal. They're good examples of what not to do, but I want to show it because everybody, or most people anyway, do it. And the key thing is to reduce the frequency at which that happens, reduce the intensity when it happens, and also, really, really, really important, make a repair. So that when you can be kind to yourself and say, okay, I'm human, I want to try to reduce the intensity and the frequency, but it's happened, I'm not going to act like it didn't, then you go back and you try to make a reconnection. So, I've learned over the years, because I do flip my lid like other people, that making repair is the most important thing we can do. And as my kids have gotten into their 20s now, it's beautiful to see how they're willing to be present for anyone in life, their friends, their romantic partners, whoever, when there's a rupture, and see how to make a reconnection. And because listen, we can have ideals for how we think we should be, and talk about mirror neurons and connection, which are fantastic. I love that stuff, and it's really a good thing to aim for. But we also have to be really kind to ourselves and realize stuff happens. The brain stops being integrated. We flip our lids. We don't act the way we want to be acting, and hey, we need to really start with kindness and compassion toward ourselves so that we can show kindness and compassion toward our loved ones, our family, our friends, people we connect with. And that's what we want to do. So, yeah, I mean, understanding the brain mechanisms of it doesn't stop it from happening, Louise.
I love that you can admit you're human.
Yeah, I mean, it's very therapeutic for all of us in the human family to put a big arm around each other and say we are all human. I think it's true.
So one of the exercises you talked about is, or a little kind of slogan you have here is name it to tame it. And when I teach relationship courses, one of the courses that I teach is about reaching your boiling point, is what it was called when I used to teach those courses through the Gottman work. And it was really every parent reaches a point where they can no longer be in the presence of someone, and they need to take a break and they need to cool down. And one of the things that you've talked about in your book is naming it to tame it. What exactly does that mean? And I know there's some interesting research behind that as well.
Yeah, well, that's a phrase I made up a long time ago that's built on a number of research tracks. And one of them that came out more recently is, the finding that when you name an emotion that you're experiencing that's being stimulated by something you see, let's say, as a visual image when you're in a brain scanner, the accurate naming of that emotion actually calms the whole brain down. So those are studies out of UCLA that we now know have a neural basis. But even before that, we knew that kids with the ability to use words to describe their internal world of emotions and feelings and thoughts and all sorts of things, they actually had more emotional competencies. That is, they could not only understand those emotions, they could calm them down as well. So that's where the phrase name it to tame it comes from, these various research tracks. And, from a practical point of view, what does that mean? That means talking with each other and even talking with ourselves or writing in a journal are really great ways to connect with ourselves and connect with others, and also to bring clarity and calm to chaos. And so that's what Name It to Tame It is all about. And, part of why I take the time to write these books is because even though a book, isn't as exciting and, the video is on YouTube or something like that, a book gives you the words to have a really deep and comprehensive understanding. So that in science we say chance favors the prepared mind. What that means is that when you prepare your mind by reading a book, it's like a relationship that nurtures a deep understanding. So when a chance thing in life happens, you're actually going to be deeply prepared because the book with words reaches deep into the way you can integrate knowledge and prepare your mind for whatever life brings out.
Yeah, I definitely think that reading is a very involved activity, so it engages more of ourselves than passively watching a video. So that's
Yeah.
definitely something I enjoy lots more about reading, and I enjoyed about reading your book. I want to kind of end on a cool exercise that you talked about in your book. Now, there's no actual research over it, but it's something that I've done with clients and found that they really enjoy, and I was just loved reading it in a book from somebody of your standing to go, oh, here's someone else doing that same exercise. There's no research behind it, but we're both agreeing on it. And this is this exercise where you say put one hand over your heart and another hand over your abdomen. Can you tell me a little bit about how to do that exercise so that maybe we leave the listeners with something that they can try at home while they're listening to us right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a very simple process that you know about and many people know about. And I've only done a little bit of research on it on myself, hooking myself physiologically up to some gadgets that measured how I was regulating myself. And it actually works to create more integration in your nervous system. And I won't go into details here, but so on a subject study of one, me, I can tell you that it's a pretty fantastic and free, thing to do. So if you put right now, if you're not driving, put one hand on your chest, so on your just right in the center of your chest, and one hand on your abdomen, just a little bit of beneath your umbilical not cord, but your belly button. You put a little teeny bit of pressure so you can feel those two hands pressing down. And just close your eyes if you're not driving or anything, and just sense what that feels like. And now switch it out. So the hand that was on your chest is now going to the abdomen. The hand that was on the abdomen goes to your chest. And put a little pressure. And now put it whichever way you felt was most comforting for you. And then as you just leave your hand there, let me just describe to you some of the data that I have. I've done this now with probably about 8,000 or 9,000 people, when I go around the world teaching. And in whatever country and whatever background people have, the numbers are remarkably similar. So about 95% of people find that it's comforting to do this. 5% of people or so, say didn't do anything one way or the other. Then of that 95%, most of them, the vast majority, let's say, the total being 90%, found that one hand was more comforting than the other. They found it comforting, but one hand on the chest was more comforting than when the other hand was on the chest. And of that group, where it was different, what's really fascinating is about 3/4 are right hand on top is most comforting, and 1/4 is left hand on top. Now, what's curious about that is when I've had small enough workshops and I'll go through in the numbers and do the statistics, it's not related to left-handedness or right-handedness, at least in the 500 people that I've done this left-handed, right-handed assessment on. So at this point, it doesn't appear to be related to left-handedness or right-handedness. No one's done any formal study of it yet. I keep on urging someone to get their PhD on it. The practical side of this is, if it was comforting for you, this is something that's available to you at any time. I mean, I often go to sleep that way. If I'm distressed, I'll do that process. And the one research study that I know of, which is me, and I hooked myself up, when I had the hand on top that worked to comfort me compared to the one that didn't, when it was comforting, my physiology showed I was balancing the accelerator sympathetic branch of my nervous system with the decelerating parasympathetic branch, and put it in a nutshell, it's like a brake and an accelerator of a car. When I had it like that, everything was in a beautiful kind of balance. And when I wasn't, my hands were reversed, things were out of balance. So it was a really interesting thing, and what was even more striking in terms of relationship, just as almost like a joke, I took the head of the research group that I was with. He didn't know what in the world I was doing. I hooked him up. I put my non-active hand, that I put my left hand on top is what I am. I put my right hand on top of his chest. Nothing happened. He's just sitting there. He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Just let me try it." I put my left hand, the one that works for me, that's on my chest, on his chest. He became completely balanced. So I don't know exactly what's going on, and it'd be great to pursue it more. But from a practical point of view, just know that many people find it comforting. The subject study of one shows it's actually really useful, and so go for it. And I hope that's helpful for everybody.
And even though there's no hard science behind my research here, no fancy machines, I can say, after seeing this done on hundreds of people, many reports have come back that they found it relaxing. For some reason, it soothed them. They were comforted. Their breathing slowed down. Just a lot of calming kinds of effects for people.
Well, that's great. And Luis, if you keep on doing it, do me a favor, add the switch of hands thing and see if you can get just a rough estimate of left hand, right hand on top, and let's compare notes.
That would be pretty interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll definitely start asking people that and include that in my research with people. Dan, I really have appreciated your time. For any listeners who are interested in Dan's work, you can check out his book, Mindsight, which is a fantastic book that really goes pretty deep into the differences between brain and mind and how your brain and your mind function and how to utilize that knowledge to become more relaxed, more peaceful, just more engaged in life in a way that's a little bit more wholesome than maybe we're currently functioning. And I think all of us want to get that edge on life, so to speak. His other book, Brainstorm, is a really fantastic look into the teenage brain. And Dan, if they want to get a hold of your work, maybe watch you speak somewhere, or they want to call you and have a session with you, how can they go about that?
So the best way to get in touch with us here is at my website, which is Dr. Dan Siegel, DrDanSiegel.com. And you can go to the website and just check us out or contact us through info@drdansiegel.com.
And also, if you want to just kind of digest his work a little bit more laid back, you're welcome to check out YouTube and type in Dr. Dan Siegel, Mindsight, or Brainstorm, and he has plenty of videos up there as well. Thank you so much. For anyone that's interested in more information, please reach out to Dan or reach us out to Lasting Love Connection. And thank you so much, Dan.
Thanks, Luis. It's a pleasure.